The element that trips me up specifically is Octopussy, Bond movie, Living Daylights, Bond movie, Live and Let Die, Bond movie, so on and so forth.
But you couldn't. You wouldn't. Not after what we just done.
I certainly wouldn't have killed you before.
That Bond feeling isn't there for this. There's stuff I like. There's stuff that doesn't feel like Bond.
I do remember making that argument on another movie we talked about, which was License to Kill. But License to Kill is a revenge plot. And I kind of, is in the same realm of that argument, was that part of the problem with License to Kill, and I think we have viewers that dislike that movie, that hate it for, various reasons.
I don't understand it.
I actually like that one. I remember like that because that's the Felix one, right? That's the revenge.
Where he avenges Felix's wife. That's number 6 on our list.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
The movie's
I think
awesome.
That one, but I think what makes it so not Bond for me is it does seem to be like written, like if this movie is written by like today's writers or whatever that do a different style, like are more comedic writers, right? In the same realm, I feel like License to Kill is written by 80s action writers of the time who are just like pounding out all these crazy action sequences, and it's really like riff and cruff and like less classy, which is what Bond is. That's what kind of separated the Arnold Schwarzenegger Stallone era versus the 60s Bond classiness of like being a gentleman, being a spy. Specifically, just the Cuba sequence in this movie is the only part of the movie that I feel exactly what you're talking about. That section of the movie feels like Roger Moore Bond to me. And it feels like kind of contrived and silly and all this stuff. And then the rest of the movie feels a little more close to like even Bond's acting and everybody else, the tone of what's going on. That feels more like on track. Like this is what I came to go see. This is kind of the tone that was set in Spectre and Skyfall and the other previous films.
Yeah, not for me. I do not get James Bond out of this. And if I had to put my finger on it, it's that Craig plays a lot of moments a little too emotionally, even for a retired Bond.
Get me into Belmarsh.
No, Blofeld's the only member of Spectre still breathing. I can't risk that.
Oh, but you will risk developing a DNA targeting weapon with a corrupt scientist for 10 years?
It does. It's Spectre.
Mallory.
What have you done?
Yes, I know how to interrogate an asset.
This interrogation is over.
Tanner, don't lecture me!
So not only does he not feel like James Bond, he doesn't even feel like Craig's James Bond. He just feels like Daniel Craig in a nice suit.
Do you know the worst thing about you?
Beyond Craig's performance, there are deeper issues with the character. Your problem with License to Kill beyond the unclassiness was always a subject matter thing. You said James Bond shouldn't be outside his jurisdiction fighting a drug cartel. He should be spying on Russia or something. But for me, it's always been about the James Bond character. And Bond's character is all over that movie, so that's one of the reasons I love it. If I have been consistent about one thing, it's that whenever Bond breaks character, I throw the movie in the... James Bond could star in a zombie movie and I wouldn't care so long as he brought his character with. Yeah, Roger Moore may have looked old in his later films, but he still behaved like James Bond, a man treating himself to pussy galore in exchange for continuously living on the edge of death. I agree with you that the choice between self-sacrifice for the big picture and a comfortable home life with Moneypenny or anyone else has always been a great theme for Bond.
Her Majesty's Secret Service is still my job.
But we saw him go through that already. That's his entire arc throughout Casino Royale and Quantum and even Skyfall, where losing Vesper hardens him and solidifies his character as Her Majesty's loyal terrier 007. As I said before, one could argue that this feels like a retired Bond, but retired Bond is already something of a contradiction to Fleming's original character, unless it were to continue the arc established at the end of the previous film. But instead, they just repeat the Vesper thing, where once again he thinks his potential wife boo betrayed him to Spectre. This movie doesn't embrace his arc from the last film and expand upon it in an interesting and one-of-a-kind way that makes use of how this Craig series has all been interconnected, leading all the way up to where he would retire. It just pointlessly resets it again. The fallout from that is nothing, really. Bond doesn't go back to work, he just stays retired.
But it's so obvious you're a man who only has time to kill. Nothing to live for.
Thank you, Nomi. That's exactly the problem. Last time Bond lost his reason to live a life outside of Her Majesty's Secret Service, he went on a murder spree. This time he buys a cottage and a boat? Yeah, he's old, but he's not that old. Bond being retired only makes sense if it's for a reason. He lost Tracy and went back to work. He lost Vesper and went back to work.
Why not stay dead? You have the perfect way out. Go and live quietly somewhere. Not many field agents get to leave this cleanly.
He could have retired after the opening of Skyfall, but he didn't because
Because we're under attack. And you know we need you.
So I'm sorry, I just can't get behind the premise that Bond stays retired after losing the reason for why he retired in the first place, unless he looks like this. And even then, it'd be more of a believable storyline that he took over for M or something rather than just retiring to GoldenEye. He should be one of two things. Either back to his old ways, or happily married with a kid. He should be living the way Lazenby would have had Tracy not been killed. Bond should not have lost Madeline at the beginning of this film. He should be living in GoldenEye with his wife and daughter when Felix Leiter shows up needing his help. The famous James Bond who pulled off the impossible and managed to actually retire from being a 00 without buying the farm. That way, whenever Felix shows up, there's actually something to lose. There's actually a choice that needs to be made. There actually is a sense of,
just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Bond would of course initially say no, but think about what elements this story already has that could possibly motivate him. We have a bad guy whose mission is to kill Spectre with a stolen weapon that targets their DNA. Bond might say, what's so bad about that? Whatever is left of Spectre post-Blofeld should be wiped out anyway. At which point Felix would respond that the weapon also kills anyone related to those agents. And hey, both your wife and baby girl share DNA with your old friend Mr. White. So if you don't come out of retirement and help us with this thing, your family is going to die. My overall point being that if you're going to do retired old man James Bond instead of classic James Bond because you're continuing your 5-part series, put just a little thought into where he's come from, how he's already changed, and what that means for this story going forward. As it is, Bond has no reason to come out of retirement, but motivate him with his family and suddenly everything is much more meaningful. For example, nobody would blink an eye when Poonhound James Bond, who would traditionally f*** the shit out of Ana de Armas, respectfully shakes the hand of the hot young female agent he's been paired up with. Maybe in a completely different Cuba sequence, she comes on to him, but he respectfully declines the invitation with a handshake because the whole reason he's teamed up with her in the first place is to save his wife and daughter, further emphasizing he's a changed man and not just behaving differently because a narcissist teamed up with a pussy to virtue signal that Bond is progressive by writing him to not behave like the character whatsoever. You're having him be Mr. Badass, who also performs the role like he's still in Knives Out, while also not being sexist at all because we don't want to offend anybody, but by trying to do all of these things at once, it all comes across as flat and uninteresting. So I rank it very low. Initially, my brain goes to above or below You Only Live Twice. I think on emotionality alone, I think on end of movie alone, I think the fact that a James Bond movie could move me to tears is enough to push it above that You Only Live Twice threshold of just general apathy, kind of going through the motions. Spectre drives me to the emotion of hate, whereas You Only Live Twice is just like, you're so cute. You tried so hard. You go get yourself a cookie. You know, whereas with Spectre, I'm like, you go f***ing die. It gives me the same feeling as Die Another Day, where it's serious stakes, but everything it does is cartoonish, while not being particularly enjoyable. I mean, yes, at times, but it is a mess. I mean, this is a mess. We've established that it was written by 17 different people, all pulling it in different directions. Yeah. It's very much like The Rise of Skywalker, where it's like just plot, trying to just get us to the end of the movie. Just get us to the end so we can just tie a bow on this whole thing. But when you get to the end, it's so deeply emotional that I'm like willing to bump it above You Only Live Twice on that alone. But then I hit Die Another Day and I'm like, there's kind of a struggle between Die Another Day and this film.
Right. But here, for me, the ending like bumps it up way more because I'm looking at all these movies and it's like, even one of my favorites, Honor Mensch Secret Service, it's like, it does a better job of like landing that than any of the other movies. Like there's no Bond movie that I cry to at the end of it. Like there's none, like, yeah, Honor Mensch Secret Service is sad, but like this is like takes it to a whole other level and you're like, God damn it.
But if the rest of the movie was awesome, that would skyrocket it. But just having an emotional ending it's like this movie has an advantage of just being the final installment, which means that they could make an ultimate sacrifice type scenario, which gives it an advantage. If only the rest of the movie was as good, then this is one of those, again, a situation where it's like, this might be a contender for number one. But if all it has is a great ending, but it takes you 3 hours of bullshit to get there, that might put it above You Only Live Twice, but it doesn't automatically mean it's better than anything at that bottom tier.